All right. So 600 years before, people started doing philosophy. By 600 years, I'm sorry, not 600 years, before 600 BC. Before 600 BC, people were not doing philosophy, okay? People had what we call the mythological worldview, okay? So what is the mythological worldview? We have to start with what is a myth, okay? The word myth in Greek means story, okay? And mythology is a story about gods. Mythology is a story about gods, and these stories, the purpose of these stories is to explain. My bad. Give me a moment. Cut it out. This is really bad. Okay, so we're going to look at what we call the mythological worldview. Okay, the mythological worldview was a time, or let's call this a time period. This was a time period when people were not doing philosophy. Okay, so we have to start from there. So this is around 600 before 600 BC, which is basically 600 years before the birth of Christ. Okay, before 600 BC, people were living in a mythological, let's say, a period of time where they believed in a mythological worldview. Okay, so what is myth? A myth is basically a story. That's what the word means. But when we say mythology, it refers to stories about gods. Okay, and these stories were told in order to explain, let's say, changing seasons. For example, winter turning to summer, summer turning to winter, or like changing seasons, for instance. And another feature of mythologies is that they're characterized by a balance between good and evil. So in mythologies, there's a fight between good and evil, and it seems like sometimes evil is winning and sometimes good is winning. It's uncertain. It's a very the balance is not it's not as if one side is always stronger and the other side is always weak. It's almost in a balance. Okay. So I'm going to give you guys an account of Norse mythology. Okay, Norse mythology, which is the story of Thor. Okay, the story of Thor. So the Vikings, who were occupying the region that is known as Scandinavia. Vikings, Scandinavia, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, these regions. So they divided the world into three parts. Okay, Midgard, Asgard, and Utgard. Midgard comprised of that region where people were living. Asgard comprised of comprised of gods. Asgard was where gods lived, and then there is Utgard, which is outside the realm of Midgard. Okay, this is where the forces of chaos, the forces of evil reside. Okay, so basically Midgard is imagined like an island. Okay, and Utgard is imagined like the outer world, and there are forces coming from outside and trying to attack that island, perhaps. So what do we see in the myth of Thor? So I'm sure some of you guys have watched the Thor films, right? Thor, the latest film was what? Thor: Love and Thunder, maybe. If you have not watched it, no problem, because it's not relevant to this discussion. I'm just telling you so that you guys have some idea. So basically, Thor is this god. He's the god of thunder. Okay, he's the god of thunder. He's also worshipped as the god of fertility. He has a hammer. He has a weapon, which is a hammer. Okay. If you guys have watched the film, you guys will know the name of the hammer is Mjolnir. Okay. So the idea that people have is that Thor has a chariot drawn by goats, and he's riding this chariot through the skies, and he's swinging his hammer. And when he swings his hammer, lightning is produced, or thunder is produced. And with thunder comes rain. So, in other words, Thor is not just worshipped as the god of thunder. Thor is also worshipped as the god of fertility, because with rain comes crops. So rain is important for crops to grow. So in the myths, in the stories about Thor, what we find is there's an element that is very common. Thor has a hammer. Thor's hammer gets stolen. Thor gets back his hammer. All right? In all the stories. If you guys have watched the movies also, same thing happens. All the movies have the same thing. In the first movie, what happens is Thor has a hammer. Hammer makes him very strong. But then Odin tells him that, you are not worthy to have the hammer. Okay? Odin tells him, you are not worthy to have the hammer. He loses his hammer, and with it all his powers. And then he gets back his hammer. He becomes worthy of wielding his hammer again later on. Same thing in the next movie, same thing in the next movie. It's a story about him losing his hammer and getting back his hammer. Same in this case. So the poem in which Thor's myth is recounted is called the Lay of Thrym. Okay? So in this poem, he fights the giants. The giants live in a place called Jotunheim. Okay? They live in a place called Jotunheim. So the story goes like this. One day, Thor wakes up, finds that he does not have the hammer. Okay, where's the hammer? Where did it go? I don't know. I need it. So his immediate suspicion is the giants have stolen. Okay, the giants are treacherous. They have probably stolen. So he and his henchman Loki decides to go and visit the land of the giants, the Jotuns. So they borrow Freya's wings. Freya has supernatural wings, let's say, and they can be borrowed apparently in this myth. So they borrow wings. Thor borrows the wings, and he and his henchman goes to the land of the giants. Yes, he goes to the land of the giants, and the king of the giants is called Thrym. Thrym is the king of the giants, and he asks him, look, I can't find my hammer. Do you guys have it? And Thrym says, yes, I do in fact have it. It is under the earth. I have hidden it under the earth somewhere. And Thrym tells him, look, if you give me Freya as a bride, I will give you back the hammer. If you give me Freya as a bride, I will give you the hammer. So here's the thing. Freya is also the goddess of fertility. So if Thor is the god of fertility, Freya is the goddess of fertility. This is a compromise that the gods are not interested in making. Okay? Because if Freya goes to the giants, fertility will suffer. Okay? People will stop having children. The grasses will stop growing. This will affect the entire ecosystem in which human beings live. So what happens is this. They decide on a plan. Okay? So I need the hammer. What am I gonna do? Okay, fine. So he has another henchman called Heimdall. Heimdall gives him a suggestion. Look, Thor, you have to dress up like a woman and go and you can go to the giants pretending to be the bride. Okay? You can do that. So this is the plan that Thor follows. So he dresses up like a woman. He pretends that he is Freya and goes to the land of the giants with Loki. All right. Freya doesn't really go. Freya is still in Asgard. So he goes there, and this is where the story gets a bit funny. So Freya goes. He has this large feast of an ox. Okay, he eats up an entire ox. he eats 8 salmons, and he eats what? Furthermore, 3 barrels of beer. Okay. This is a crazy amount of food. It is suspicious. Women don't eat this much. All right? Which is a crazy amount of food. What with dieting and whatnot. All right. People are suspicious, all right? The giants are suspicious. Okay, is this really Freya? How is it possible? So Loki quickly comes in and says, look, no, look, you guys are misunderstanding. Freya was so excited about the marriage, she has not eaten for a week. Okay? She has not eaten for an entire week. More interesting things happen. So, Thor is about to get married to Thrym. Thrym lifts the veil, bridal veil, and is about to kiss Thor right now, thinking that it's Freya. But then Thrym notices that the eyes are burning. The eyes of his bride is burning red. And he's like, wait a second, this is weird. Why is it like this? Loki comes in and says, look, Freya was so excited about the marriage that she hasn't slept for a week. All right. Thor, Loki saves the day again. All right, Loki's clever, he saves the day again. And Thrym is very happy. Okay, fine. I got a bride that loves me a lot. All right? After everything is said and done, including the kissing and the everything. All right? Thrym orders the hammer to be bought. And once Thor's get the hammer is bought on Thor's lap. All right? Thor gets the hammer and he's in a fury. He just takes the hammer, swings it, and kills all the giants. He kills the king, and then he kills his henchmen, and all the kin that the giants have. So that concludes the story of Thor, or the Lay of Thrym. Okay. In spite of besides being an interesting story, so there are some lessons here that this myth is trying to impart. So it is like this. The story is like this. When Thor when Thor loses his hammer, there is a drought, or it's winter. Things are not growing. Everything is dying out. Everything around is dying out. When Thor gets back his hammer, people assume that it's spring. Okay? Winter to spring, or if it rains, Thor has gotten back his hammer, because Thor is the god of fertility. So if Thor is the god of fertility, it means that if it goes in a positive direction, like if flowers are growing and trees are growing or rain is happening, it means Thor got back his hammer. If there is drought, if it's winter, things are not growing, crops are not growing, that means Thor has lost his hammer. Okay? So myths were used to explain, for example, natural phenomena like this. This is just one example. So people, it was not just the story, right? People did not just have the explanation. People had there were other things too. People thought, okay, fine, let's help out Thor. Let's say they were having a bad winter, or let's say they were having a drought. They thought, okay, let us help out our God. Let's sacrifice animals in his name. And they did these things to speed up, let's say, the process of the coming spring, or the process of coming rain, let's say. All right, they assume that if I make an offering, or if I enact a play like the Lay of Thrym, the god of fertility will become strong, and he will be able to overcome the forces of chaos, the giants, quicker, and the seasons will be better. Crops will grow better. Crops will be more fertile. Okay? Basically, this is the kind of, let's say, worldview that people had at that time. We're done.